Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hello. Is anything happening today? It's Wednesday, September 25th, 2019, and I'm supposed to do another radio show, and I'm wondering if any of you know whether there's anything happening today. I don't know. I thought I'd invite some guests in to tell us whether anything was going on. It's a quiet day here at Kagro in the Morning World Headquarters, sending the kids off to school. It was very interesting. I'll start off with the top news of the day. My son's school was having what they were calling Decades Day today, you see, and you were supposed to wear something that indicated that you were dressing for a certain decade. And I suppose the more adventurous of the kids will perhaps dress up from the 50s and grease their hair back. I believe that's what my older son did, but that was in middle school. You should have seen what happened with that one. Or you can dress up from the 60s or 70s, or really any decade will do. This is a decade, I suppose, but I think you're supposed to choose an old decade. And he had settled on the 1990s for whatever reason. And in fact, we ended up turning the clock back just a little bit more to the 1980s. But he needed something to wear that would indicate that he was, I don't know, visiting as a time traveler, perhaps, from the 1990s. So I dug out some old T-shirts. And I had all sorts of interesting offerings for him. I had a Super Bowl 25 T-shirt from 1990. I guess it was played in 1991. It was the end of the 1990 season. Giants, Bills. Everyone remember that one? 20-19. The Bills field goal kicker, was it Scott Norwood? Was that his name? Who had missed, you may remember from the call of the game, wide and left. And a last-minute attempt to win the game on the field goal. Didn't work. It was one of the first times that I had seen one of those T-shirts that was printed and they had ready on the field with the score on it and everything. And the first time they had to get rid of the T-shirts that they had prepared just in case the Bills won, all that kind of stuff. That was really interesting. He actually didn't take that one. He walked away from that one. I had a Barcelona 92 Olympics T-shirt. I had an Atlanta 96 Olympics T-shirt to offer him as well. I had an undated, but probably 1990 or so Red Hot Chili Peppers T-shirt, and he didn't take that. He was actually more intrigued at first by, this was interesting, I just had to sort of tell him exactly what was going on with this thing. He was interested in my Operation Desert Shield, not Storm, Desert Shield T-shirt. I think they were distributing those free in the Washington, D.C. area at the time. I don't know why I ended up with one of those. It's an ugly thing, but I had to warn him. I said, I should warn you that the back has a large design on it that says, I support U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia, which was not a popular position necessarily then or now. Although, let me tell you a little story. And so I began to explain to him, 14 years old as he is, that one of the people who did not support stationing U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia at the time was a gentleman by the name of Osama bin Laden, and probably you've heard of him. Oh, yeah. And though most people had forgotten about it by the time he struck, you know who he is and what he was responsible for. Yes. Well, apparently a large part of his initial motivation was the apparent blasphemy in his eyes of stationing U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia. And I just thought I'd tell him the whole story, and here's what happened, and here's why the troops were in Saudi Arabia, and what was Desert Shield, and what happened, and what it became Desert Storm, and yada yada, and our first tangle with Iraq, and how later, when that president's son was president, he made sure everybody thought that Osama bin Laden's eventual strike in retaliation for stationing U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia and many other things, I'm sure, in his mind, that we eventually pinned that on, or tried to pin it on, Iraq, oddly enough. And how strange is that, since that's why we were there in the first place, and the idea that the Saudi person would have struck and we would take that out on Iraq, which was the reason that we were there the first time. Well, you know, it's just one of those weird situations. And by the way, Did you know that, like, the other week, your current president, or at least the man who purports to be president, was thinking he ought to send some troops to Saudi Arabia because, once again, Saudi Arabia had been threatened and everybody was interested in pretending that the threat came from a totally different country than it actually came from. So I thought best that you be prepared. If you're going to go to school wearing this thing, you should know what it's about. At which point he said, Dad, it's getting late and it's time for me to leave for the bus. And now I don't want that shirt anymore. Thanks for talking me out of it. I didn't know whether I was talking about out of it or into it. Anyway, it was a very interesting story, and he ended up actually switching decades, and end of the story, he went to school in my Mikhail Gorbachev Glasnost Perestroika t-shirt instead. So the 1980s won out over the 1990s. Now, I think I will take a quick look around at the headlines, and maybe we can have Greg Dworkin come by and tell us if anything is happening. I haven't opened the paper this morning, but of course, as you know, Daily Kos Radio is live now, and we don't have time for looking at the newspaper. Only one burning question this morning. Bill tells me, why do Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, Dem from Connecticut, you know as Greg Dworkin here on the show, and Joan McCarter, a.k.a. Joan McCarter, all have confetti in their hair? We'll answer that question when Greg comes and visits, and I imagine, well, we'll leave it up to Joan. She could have a totally separate reason for why she's got confetti in her hair, but I believe it's probably, probably pretty much the same as the rest of us. The president, I'll be right back. Here comes Greg. He can take over the show. I have to leave and impeach the president. So Greg can take things from here. I'm sure he's got some headlines. Once he's impeached, I'll be back and I'll let you know. Good morning, Greg. How are you doing?
Hey, good morning. I think the best headline combines everything you were talking about. A little sports story, burning news. You know?
Right.
Apparently there was a fire in Philadelphia, and one of the local heroes actually had to catch children thrown out from a window during a fire, which he did. Shoot. And then people saw him, and news media came up to interview him. This is a true story.
Yeah.
And he was describing what happened. My buddies, were throwing him out, and we was catching him, unlike Nelson Aguilar, who was the receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles.
He said that?
He said that after catching children thrown from a window during a fire.
Man.
He said, we was catching him, unlike Aguilar.
Well, these are the guys who threw snowballs at Santa. People
care about sports. They just really care about their teams.
They do. Saying. Do I have that right? They threw the snowballs at Santa that time, didn't they?
Well, they care about their teams. I'll just say that.
I'm pretty sure that was them, unless it was Jets fans. Possible.
I don't know.
Okay. Anyway,
somebody asked me if it's going to be another, one of those.
We're having a Decades Day.
Terrible days for the Jets and Giants, and I said, "Why? Is it Sunday?"
Okay. Well,
we have the Yankees, and that's the reason we have the Yankees is because we have the Knicks and the Jets. I mean, that's the whole point, right? You got to balance things out. But in any case, moving on to something a little bit more important.
It was the Eagles fans. All right, yeah.
We're talking about I can't play it on the air. It doesn't work that way, but there's a great segment from Stephen Colbert yesterday where he introduces the fact to his audience that Nancy Pelosi is introducing a formal impeachment inquiry.
Okay.
And, that
happened?
There's a minute and a half standing ovation where he doesn't get a chance to finish. That's the point.
Okay. Here's the model. That we can play. I don't think you can copyright applause.
Well, it's on YouTube, but
give it a shot.
It starts at about 1:15.
I should just use it as my own applause track on the
you
show.
Should,
actually,
that's what we need. We need a laugh track for this.
Right. I should just grab that.
70s, TV comedies.
Yeah. I'm going to grab one of those.
So, Garrett Graff points out, don't let GOP talking points today confuse this point. Starting an impeachment inquiry is a commitment to a fact-finding process, not a vote to convict or remove.
Right,
I think he's channeling Yoni Applebaum from back in January. You start impeachment because impeachment is a process. More than enough evidence in myriad fronts to commit to organized fact-finding, says Garrett Graff. Donald Trump, if he has nothing to hide and has not committed high crimes and misdemeanors, could cooperate with fact-finding, and it could go nowhere.
Yeah. What else he got?
But on other fronts, he's not cooperating nor recognizing Congress's legitimate oversight role and status as co-equal branch.
Oh.
And so, again, I'm 100% in with impeachment now. I think that the Ukraine thing changed everything. It's from Ukraine, but it's the Ukraine thing. And I think it's vitally important. Now, I'm looking at the reaction from the other side. For example, I want the official government response to this, so I'm looking at Fox and Friends. And Steve Doocy says, no president in American history has been better prepared for an impeachment than Donald Trump. With also more deserving, I would add out.
Right.
But political scientist Jonathan Weiler points out you do have to appreciate Doocy's glass half full approach. And here's another one.
Maybe. Okay, yes.
This is from Nancy Cook over at Nan Cook at Politico. Inside Trump world, public defiance versus private anxiety over impeachment. Trump survived the explosive Access Hollywood tapes, the Charlottesville uproar, Stormy Daniels, the Mueller report, and dozens of other threats to his presidency. But his latest problem could be more challenging.
Yeah.
In private, White House allies and aides say the impeachment momentum now presents a serious threat to the rest of Donald Trump's legislative agenda, as if he had one, to his negotiating strength with world leaders, as if he had any left, and to his concentration, which is also, I mean, the assumptions one makes in this story are pretty astounding, to his concentration. If you watch him speak at length, as some of the, I think you read these the other day, come over from overseas, meet him for the first time, and listen to him for an hour, and you go, oh my gosh, this guy is completely incoherent.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of incoherence going on these days.
Right. Few in the White House or the wider Trump orbit have privately defended Trump's call with the Ukraine leader. The incident violates principle that U.S. officials should never allow or encourage foreign governments to interfere in U.S. election. They're pivoting any discussion to the Bidens, which is not really working for them. And, what's also fascinating is how Rudy Giuliani is being thrown under the bus. I'll give you a couple examples of that. First of all, there is an enormously impactful story from the Washington Post on Rudy. See if I can just scroll down to it. But I'm going to start by noting, and this is all from the pundit roundup. This is really outlined in yellow so everybody could see, but it's a Dan Amira quote. I hadn't seen the full Giuliani quote from May. It's pretty wild. Remember this in context now. Yes. This is the quote from a New York Times story dated May 9th, 2019. Okay. And here's the quote. We're not meddling in an election. We're meddling in an investigation, which we have a right to do, Mr. Giuliani said in an interview on Thursday when asked about the parallel to the special counsel's inquiry. There's nothing illegal about it. Somebody could say it's improper. This isn't foreign policy. I'm asking them to do an investigation that they're doing already and that other people are telling them to stop. That investigation had already been completed as a factual matter. And I'm going to give them reasons why they shouldn't stop it because that information will be very, very helpful to my client, happens to be Donald Trump, and may turn out to be helpful to my government.
There's a key point there, yeah.
Yeah. So while that's going on, the Washington Post publishes yesterday, Giuliani pursued shadow Ukraine agenda as key foreign policy officials were sidelined. And just to pull one quote from that piece, an awful lot of people were trying to keep a meeting from happening for the reason that it would not be focused on Ukraine-U.S. relations, one former official said, speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss the sensitive matter. I don't know why they didn't just put a picture of Bolton there, but they could have. One official speaking,
he's hiding behind
like others, on the condition of anonymity, described the climate as verging on bloodletting. Rudy, he did all of this, one U.S. official said. This S show that we're in, it's him injecting himself into the process. And then a companion piece from the Daily Beast, U.S. ambassador roped into Rudy's quest to smear Biden. That ambassador was involved with the now infamous phone call that is Washington headed toward an impeachment inquiry. In other words, they're starting to throw Rudy under the bus. They're saying it's his fault. John Kennedy, the senator, was on Morning Joe this morning, and they pressed him, as they did Chuck Todd yesterday.
Yes, heard about that one.
So what's going on here? You're just gaslighting us, Senator, Chuck Todd said to him. But, what's going on with sending Rudy, the private attorney, and not official FBI or State Department people? Yeah. This morning, I'm trying to remember the exact quote. Kennedy said, "I can't account for Rudy. He's a free-range chicken. I have no idea."
What?
He's running all over.
All right.
You know, I'm not saying anything about Rudy. I can't account for Rudy. Rudy is being thrown under the bus by everybody in Trump world because somebody's going to have to take the fall for starting an impeachment inquiry. And for all of you who are looking over the weekend at Rudy Giuliani's crazy stuff and saying, "Oh, it's going to work because it always works. This is what he does. He throws smokes and it didn't work." And as a matter of fact, Rudy's partially responsible for how the impeachment inquiry came together, convincing moderate Democrats that they had more to lose from not doing something than doing something.
Yeah, that was. I'm glad you put those two articles together. I think it was important to juxtapose them, even though they're from several months apart. I think the first one where he's denying that anything's wrong with it is from maybe even from May. Maybe a little
May
later.
9th.
Yeah. But key part in there that I wanted to highlight for everybody, I think this is interesting. So part of the later article is, I didn't go on my own. It wasn't me freelancing. I was sent by the State Department is the big claim. What I thought was interesting was looking back at his claim from May where he says I was going, to help my client and I was on a mission that would help my client and maybe, just maybe, help the U.S. government as well. Does that sound like a State Department mission to you? We're going to send you there, and it might have some
it's a Pompeo
national interest or something. Yeah, now Pompeo, I guess at this point, is he – I don't know what Pompeo personally is doing, but the State Department is saying no such thing. We did not send you.
Except this other piece from the Daily Beast says there's at least 2 ambassadors that were involved with this.
Yes.
See, part of the problem is what it's
3.
doing
One
is
of
highlighting
a real
the
one
fact
and 2 fake ones.
but it's highlighting the fact that the State Department has become completely domestically political. In other words, you have all these Trumpists that have been placed in places like the Justice Department, which we're familiar with Bob Barr, but also all over the State Department. And the other finger in the pie here is Mick Mulvaney. So between Mulvaney and Pompeo, who basically between the two actually run the government. I mean, that's not an exaggeration.
No,
there isn't
all
anybody else of talent or
or
gravitas in the White House except for those two at this point, and they've kind of split things between them. Except each one tries to encroach on the other's empire. But between them, they're setting Rudy up to be the fall guy so that they don't get fingered. But in fact, their fingers are all over it, both of them.
Yeah. Well, it's quite a mess, certainly, and we'll have to see how there's going to be now plenty of anonymous sources from the State Department, I imagine, will be coming forward because now they've dragged them into it. They have to defend themselves.
Right. So now everybody's leaking. That's part of the whole process here. And so the whole idea that we have this covered and we have a omerta here. We have a whole shield of a code of silence that everybody's going to break it. And a lot of stuff's happening now. Everybody, I'm very pleased, as bad as the media can be, and they can be very bad, and they're still not perfect about this, trying to both side stuff.
Yeah.
They at least have gotten the idea that you can't Bill Barr,
or Bob
Bruce
Barr.
Barr.
Yeah, right.
You can't take the transcript that's going to be released,
maybe,
and make it into a exculpatory. This is going to set the whole thing. There's nothing there.
Yes,
everybody's already moving beyond that and saying, I have a little picture I made of the very bottom of the pundit roundup of a jacket that Melania is wearing, which just simply says, I don't really care about the transcript. Do you?
Okay.
The transcript doesn't matter. The transcript isn't a verbatim reading out of the text. First of all, everybody from Nixon era reminds us that when Nixon turned over the transcripts of his tapes, they didn't match what the actual tape said later on.
No.
When he had to turn those over to Congress. That's number one. Number two, because of that incident, that little minor dust-up with Nixon, they don't tape these things anymore.
Yeah.
We don't tape them. The Russians tape them.
Well, yeah.
The Ukrainians tape them, but we don't tape them.
Right. We might.
So
we might.
What happens is you have somebody, Evelyn Farkas and other people who have been there, keep telling us there aren't any verbatim transcripts. Somebody takes notes. And so when the quote transcript end quote is turned over today. It's going to be a sanitized version of it's like notes at a meeting.
Yes.
People are yelling at each other, screaming at each other, throwing their shoes. And then when you read the committee minutes, a thorough discussion was had about this issue.
Right.
And it doesn't really tell you exactly what happened, but it's going to be sanitized and cleaned up and then turned over. And then, he's going to say, look, see, nothing's going on here. As a matter of fact, Rudy was on Fox this morning ranting about the fact that I've already read the transcript and there's nothing there. In other words, Intelligence Committee, Senate and House people haven't seen it, but Rudy has. How could that be? Well, he's probably writing it.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot about this transcript. I did see old administration hands saying, they stopped taping the phone calls after Watergate, although there was the caveat, these guys, they may have changed procedures, and Trump is like sort of famously known for doing things like that, for taping conversations or for having his conversations taped without his knowledge as well. But that's
right. But the point is that the media and the rest of us, of course, are not breathlessly awaiting what the transcript says.
No,
that's what John Kennedy tried to pull this morning by saying, let's just see the transcript. The transcript has nothing to do with it. What people want is the whistleblower to go to Congress and talk to Congress. That's what's going to matter.
Right. I have seen a good 85 pundits say, we didn't ask for the transcript. We asked for the whistleblower report.
And we would like the whistleblower to tell us what's in the report himself. And so what I'm saying is that section that you just mentioned, that response is way better than, we got the bar,
bring that up
the bar cliff notes of what the Mueller report actually said. Yes. That's not happening this time.
That is not. And I'm glad for that. They're definitely on the ball with that one. Everyone was very enthused about Chuck Todd actually pushing back a bit yesterday as well. Also, I note for the record this morning, David Frum reminding everybody that Trump released an official transcript in the past to prove something or other, and it was falsified and edited, bringing us back the story of the White House editing out an insult offered up to a reporter, Cecilia Vega, who I guess he answered. She must have said, "I'm not thinking that something," and he said, "I know you're not thinking. You never do." And they changed the transcript so that it said inexplicably, "I know you're not thanking. You never do." So they've been caught red-handed editing transcripts in the past. They have every reason to do so now. And
we're going to get one now. It's going to say blah people.
Right, exactly. So it's probably not. I think there's even one more example out there of them editing transcripts, although not necessarily of a phone call. But again, forget all of that. The transcript of the call doesn't matter. Everybody has been saying from the beginning the whistleblower report is based on much more than just this phone call. Plus, they're editing it. Plus, they're trying to pull the wool over your eyes. Plus
3 years of knowing he lies.
Right.
And so that's the trouble with knowing that you lie. Once that is established, then it's very difficult to say, well, I have some notes here that show that I'm not lying. Who wrote them? Well, I did.
Yes, right. And we know
thank you, Your Honor. I rest my case.
And we know that there isn't even tape to back you up, so forget it. Yeah,
right.
real interesting.
So all of that's happening at the same time. And, of course, we have a rather serious process going on here. And Trump world is not reacting, as you might think. I mean, the fact of the matter is that a whole bunch of stuff happened. Why are we going to see the transcript? Why are we going to see the whistleblower in Congress? Why are we going to see the whistleblower's complaint in Congress? And that happens tomorrow. Mm-hmm. The DNI goes to Congress tomorrow, testifies, and brings the whistleblower complaint in a redacted form with him.
Oh, right.
And why is that happening? If it's an impeachment inquiry, I don't know that the redacted form is going to fly.
No, not. I mean, that's the whole point of what we've been talking about, the necessity for an impeachment hearing all along, because it defeats almost all and possibly all claims to confidentiality and need for redaction, etc. So,
right. Let me just finish up some reaction in regard to legally what that means. Not that I'm a lawyer. I don't even come close to pretending to be one. But a story in the USA Today about that.
Yes.
Which is tangential, but gives you an idea, if you just use your imagination, about what this means. Here's the title. Trump's lawyers question Congress's power to investigate him, battle House over demand for financial records.
Yeah, well.
Okay, this is from May 14th, 2019. Okay, but my point is, if it's part of an impeachment inquiry, that argument really takes a completely different turn.
Yes.
What right do you have to look at Trump's record? Well, because this is an impeachment inquiry.
Yeah. I mean,
are you arguing that because
they're
starting to argue, well, it's you can't look at Trump's anything.
Right. I mean, that's eventually going to have to be their position, is that you're powerless.
Right. So I thought this was just a really good summary of just a capsule of where things are. I mentioned the fact that Trump world is getting worried about this, as they should be, and they're going to throw Rudy under the bus as the first pass. But Haldeman and Ehrlichman did not survive this, no matter how strong they looked at the time. So I don't know about Mulvaney and Pompeo. They're going to get sucked into this too. But anyway, Burgess Everett writing in Politico, Senate Republicans caught in the impeachment glare, at least this is his tweet about the story, with divergent approaches already among at-risk Rs. McSally says kamikaze mission that will help Republicans. This at a time that Cindy McCain has a different story saying, I think that Arizona is really ripe for the Democrats to take. That's John McCain's late wife. And then Cory Gardner in Colorado, asked if he still supports Trump, says, well, let's get to the bottom of this. Kind of a Mitt Romney kind of response.
Yeah, that's rather
but not everybody's automatically saying, oh, my gosh, what are you doing? It is obviously a witch hunt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's supposed to be the line.
Plus, we had the unanimous consent vote yesterday to have the whistleblower complaint sent to Congress. Now, it's non-binding, but, why did Mitch McConnell not block that? Because Republicans are getting antsy.
Yeah, it's there was no real, I guess no political benefit to him to standing in the way. They certainly could have objected and asked for a roll call vote and say, I'll schedule it tomorrow. But
yeah, they could have slowed it down.
I think he ended up clearing it because he didn't want to have anybody on the record at that thing. So that could have been it, too. We'll be back in 2. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm just trying to keep up on all of these fantastic happenings here that are flying by on Twitter. But where do we leave off? Oh, yes, we were just finishing up about why would Mitch McConnell let the resolution calling for the release of the whistleblower report, that was it, go
He
forward.
Let it go by unanimous consent.
Yeah, and, everybody wonders what trick he may have up his sleeve, and there may be something, we don't know, but one trick, such as it is clearly it's a difficult thing to deal with politically, and by allowing it to go through by unanimous consent, well, the downside is it gives the media the opportunity to say that the vote was unanimous, but what was actually happening was that nobody had to put their name to it. And nobody also had to put their name to any objection. So they let it slide by, and it happens. But because it's non-binding, it's not that much of a disaster. And this way, nobody... We've realized, or the rest of the world really, besides us, who've already realized it for a long time, realize now that even if impeachment doesn't result in a removal of the president, the Republicans are all going to have to put their names to okaying what he did or agreeing to remove him. And they're becoming uncomfortable with that reality. And this was sort of the first test of it. You're going to have to put your name to this if you don't want this thing released. Or even if you do.
Well, my friends, yes. It's time for a little game theory.
Oh no. All right. Well, things usually go downhill from here.
I mean, but I wish I could find the reference to this. I came across it as I was reading and preparing for the show, but I think it's pretty smart. So what's in it? What is in the whistleblower complaint, or what would the whistleblower attest to, what's in the transcript. I mean, there's three possibilities. One is that it's completely exculpatory.
Right. I just wanted to let you know Trump is awesome. Just thought I'd tell you. I'm sure that's
highly unlikely.
Yeah.
Possibility number two is that there's a smoking gun here, which is going to make him resign.
Vaping gun.
Highly unlikely, because that's not usually how it works. Usually what happens is, I just want you to know the boss has an offer that you can't refuse, and he gets unhappy if you refuse his offer. But what was the offer? Well, you know what it is. I mean, there's nothing there that you could say.
Oh yeah, right. Maybe
that's not going to happen.
I'm not going to tell you because they can't indict a sitting president anyway.
So the most likely possibility is that it's ambiguous. And if the Republicans can get their holds on ambiguity, then they can throw Senator Kennedy up on Chuck Todd or on Morning Joe and say, look, that's how you interpret it, but I interpret it as, and so they need something, because right now they have nothing. And what we do know is that Trump and Giuliani have already admitted to it, and Giuliani's being thrown under the bus. So they need some material. They don't have anything. And so my interpretation of what happened is that they moved this along because they need some talking points, and they just don't have enough. They're not going to survive by just making fun of Democrats on this. That's the importance of a address to the nation, which is essentially what Nancy Pelosi did yesterday at 5 o'clock after a rollout of Democrats. And the number, I don't know where we're at, but as of this morning when I woke up, it was 207. You need 218 to pass something or agree to something.
Right.
So she's going to have her Democrats, and it's clearly serious. And they can't just get by saying, oh, well, Liz Cheney said this is stupid. That's not good enough. They need something. So my interpretation of what happened is McConnell needs something to, make into smoke and mirrors. Give us something.
Okay. Well, I suppose that would be one way of trying to find that information.
In fact, the White House is doing that, because immediately after the impeachment formalization, all of a sudden the transcript's going to come forward, and we'll figure out what to do about the whistleblower. And of course, according to the story, which Nancy Pelosi is telling, Trump called her and said, how can we work something out on this whistleblower thing?
That was a pretty amazing report.
And she said, you just need to follow the law, and more or less hung up on him. I mean, basically, that's a story. I'm sure it was more than that, but it's a great story.
Yeah, I can't
and that's the kind of story that the
that.
Democrats have, the Republicans don't. That's why they have to release this.
Maybe stuff. I do. I don't know. It's difficult to believe. It's difficult to know what I believe, whether Trump did something. I mean, it seems so ridiculous that surely he must know, but I assume he has put himself in that position before.
That's the wonderful thing. Business. I'm sure it's completely made up, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean,
it's truthy enough so that that's what happened.
Yeah, but imagine calling and saying, can we work something out on this?
With him? Absolutely.
You think?
That's why it was such a wonderful story.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know.
Did he do it? I don't think he did it, but could he do it? Sure, absolutely. So. It's totally within character.
Well, that's rather amazing.
Deal maker. That's how I make deals.
I guess so. I call up at my lowest possible point with zero leverage when you finally got me dead to rights.
And then I leaked a story that said that they called me.
Right. She called. She was begging me. Tears running down her eyes. She's saying, "Sir, please let me work something out." Yeah, I guess.
Anyway, let's get back to a more analytical piece here. This is from electoralvote.com. Should Trump be worried? There's no question that Trump needed something to run on in 2020, and he didn't really have anything. Or more accurately, everything he tried wasn't working. Now he can wield impeachment like a sledgehammer to beat the Democrats over the head and rally his base. This is a assumption that somehow or other he needs to rally his base. However, that is the silver lining in a development that's otherwise full of rain clouds. Trump's deeply exposed in the Ukraine situation, beginning with potential bribery, influence peddling, corruption, and other high crimes and misdemeanors that stem from the original phone calls. Then, learning nothing from the Mueller situation, he tried to keep everything secret from Congress. I'll remind everybody he started this the day after the Mueller report was done, thus exposing himself to obstruction charges. The speaker is absolutely correct when she says that regardless of what we learn today or in the future, the available evidence is already very damning. On top of that, while Trump is a master of publicity, the Democrats aren't dummies here either. They're going to be airing his dirty laundry on the front pages and the politics websites and the news programs for months. Reportedly, the whistleblower wants to testify before the House, and if that comes to pass, the audience that tunes in will watch the greatest day of political drama in the last 50 years, and it'll make the audience for Brett Kavanaugh look like a Trump inaugural crowd. Undoubtedly, the whistleblower would be under marching orders to Stonewall, just like Lewandowski did. However, if that person was interested in following such orders, they would presumably not be whistleblowing, much less testifying.
Be true also.
Further, that person, whoever they may be, does not need Trump's endorsement for a Senate run. No. They would have significant legal protections against retribution, so if they appear, the smart money says they spill their guts.
Yeah. LOL laws, but okay.
Nate Silver has advice on how the Democrats should handle this. Keep it simple, stupid. That is to say, focus on Ukraine and nothing else. Arguments about that. Of course, this is not Pelosi or Nadler's first rodeo. They know this. After all, they were both there when Clinton basically got impeached over something as inconsequential as a cigar, in a manner of speaking. And that said, the blue team now has much greater political and legal cover to look under rocks for anything and everything they can find. It's like Discovery, right? I mean, I'm going to sue you. Okay, please.
We were just lectured. Keep it to Ukraine.
Further, the impeachment train has now left the station. So even if whistleblower gate proves to be a dud, Trump's hardly out of the woods and is still likely to get impeached over something. Again, all of this stuff is in the open here. Again, the Democratic base is simply not going to be happy with, well, we tried. And speaking of political cover, and this is the part of it I really like, there's already one poll out from YouGov that assesses how people feel about a Ukraine-related impeachment. And here's the headline. More than half of Americans support impeachment if President Trump pushed Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden.
Okay.
I mean, that's really the bottom line here. This is not acceptable. And the American public sees this as not as a thing that's acceptable. And if I may, to hell with Trump's base. It doesn't matter what they think here.
Okay, I'll allow that.
That's 76% of Democrats, 55% of all U.S. adults, and 51% of independents, and even 32% of Republicans who support impeachment strongly or somewhat if the allegations against Trump are sustained. This is not a good starting point.
No.
Remember, Nixon started way lower. I think it was at like 14%. This is a good idea until stuff got going. Yes, this isn't the Nixon era. No, we don't have three networks anymore. Huntley Brinkley and Walter Cronkite are gone. Everybody gets their news from Fox. I get that. But people still pay attention, and repeated headlines over months do sink in.
Yes.
And the last point this fellow writing here makes is Trump distractions aren't very distracting. He's got one. For example, this is a great one. So Greta Thunberg comes and talks at the UN. She says people are suffering, people are dying, entire ecosystems are collapsing.
Yes.
We're in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? You may remember that.
Yes.
Trump tweets that and says, she seems like a very happy young girl looking forward to a bright and wonderful future.
Right.
So Greta takes that and makes it her Twitter bio.
I should too.
I should too. We all should. Right? So there's a nice picture here. Greta Thunberg. And this is, let's see if I can just get that image for you. But if you read her Twitter bio, basically what it says is a very happy young girl looking forward to a bright and wonderful future.
I didn't even know you read Swedish.
Yeah. So, the idea that, Trump's going to be able to do all these little distractions and then people aren't going to pay attention to impeachment. No, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen that way.
Okay, well, that one certainly didn't work.
That one certainly didn't. So this is Crooked. This is Brian Beutler writing that lessons of impeachment and the end of Trump's impunity make some good points here. Now, Brian wanted us to impeach him, us, the United States, us, the Democrats, wanted him to be impeached months and months and months ago. What he writes is it took the utter corruption of American foreign policy and a brazen assault on the public's right to a free and fair election for Democratic leaders and other reluctant factions of the party to reconsider their opposition to impeaching President Trump. Gratefully, they had a breaking point because the offenses that Trump now appears likely to be impeached for prove that, left unchecked, he destroyed the foundations of self-government to maintain his grip on power. That's what this is all about. Mm-hmm. The damage Trump has already done is incalculable, and U.S. democracy remains in grave danger. But if these Democrats had no breaking point, they'd have effectively handed it over to him without a fight. There's a general lesson here that Democrats, as they enter a new phase of this confrontation, and for the Democrats who will wage future battles about the consequences of the kind of timidity we've witnessed over the past several months. political leaders who face no consequences for the corruption will be emboldened to commit more serious crimes, and the longer Democrats wait to confront Trump, the worse things will get. And that's a good point. I
Sure.
Again, on the side that timing is everything, and there was a reason Pelosi waited. And once the Ukraine opportunity was handed to her, where she could give this to her moderates, and those moderates, like Abigail Spanberger, our favorite example, could go back to her constituency and say, this is why I'm doing it in a coherent way, then she went for it. Okay?
Yes.
And that doesn't mean she wanted it or she didn't want it. She was weighing the odds and what it means to her caucus. In other words, doing her job. But it's here now. And so all these arguments about she should have done it last week, next week, 2 months ago, the way I said she didn't listen to me, are dumb. Drop them. It's not important. What's important now is where we go from here. And where we go from here is a serious and formal impeachment inquiry where Trump is not going to be able to stonewall.
Well, that would be great. Ordinarily
Doesn't mean
I
we
like
them.
to.
Doesn't mean we've won.
No.
But it's hugely important.
Ordinarily, I would linger a little bit over how long it took certain people to get around to impeachment. But I understand the point, and certainly if it really were worth doing, well, then the rest of the show would be me talking about how I wrote this column that you just read from Brian Beutler back when he was still Juicebox Mafia in 2007. So everybody's bored by that point by now. But Joan has been doing a yeoman's job in reminding everybody that, Daily Kos and its writers were actually at the forefront of pointing out the consequences of ignoring this kind of corruption and trying to settle it at the ballot box was that you would get somebody, we didn't know it was going to be Trump, but you would get another Republican administration picking up the ball right where the last one dropped it, and a Democratic administration in the meantime is merely a respite in the Republican rapaciousness with the Constitution. So, all right, we're all vindicated. Now what? Let's
exactly. We're all vindicated now. What? Listen, I scored 4 touchdowns in high school, and here I am, 55-year-old guy still talking about it.
Right.
Or
I just
whatever
spent
that show
5
was.
minutes on it anyway, so.
And again, we were right about the Iraq War. I don't mean to diminish it.
Right, that too.
But
I don't
where
know
do we go from here? What happens now? And arguing about, well, I was right because I said 3 months ago we should do this. Well, Pelosi was right in that she didn't have the votes, and now she does.
All right.
Well, she should have had the votes 3 months ago. Okay, but she didn't. And you know what? Now she does, and we're going for it. So where do we go from here?
That is a good question. I don't know. I mean, I have some ideas. Some other people have written some ideas down. I can read them to you.
Yeah, well, we'll see. But as that goes on,
we'll see what happens.
Some polling in the besides the YouGov poll that I have. There's some important primary polling.
No, that's
now, remember, Joe Biden is the focus of Trump's ire at this particular point. But the Quinnipiac poll just came out, 2020 National Democratic poll. Elizabeth Warren is at 27 plus
Delaney?
8 from the last time, and Biden's at 25 minus 7.
Okay.
Sanders is at 16. Basically, everybody else is treading water, but Sanders is at 16. Buttigieg at 7. Mayor Pete's hanging around. He's not going anywhere. Harris is at 3. She's down 4. Castro at 2. Klobuchar 2. Beto 2. Yang 2. I think Cory Booker has an asterisk here.
Is Delaney still running? I keep using him as a joke. Did he formally drop out?
John Delaney? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Do you mean John Delaney? I never heard of John Delaney.
Honestly, I have no idea whether some of these guys are still in the picture. I know that Tulsi Gabbard will be back on the debate stage. That's
so they'll have to split it into 2.
Super happy thing.
But these are great numbers for Warren, and there's another poll out, which is a new California poll. I sent the graphic to you with there's actually been an update which has been fixed. But David Lauder points out from the LA Times, Warren takes Democratic presidential nomination lead in California, and she moved from 18 in the last poll in June to 29 now. Biden went from 22 to 20. Biden was leading. Now he's behind. Bernie went from 17 to 19. Kamala Harris went from 13 to 8. I would remind people that's her home state.
Yes, she's calling now to remind us. That's odd. You had mentioned the numbers of Biden going from 22 to 20, but in the the graphic says they give him a downward slope, but then it says 22 and 22. Is that
correct? But I wrote David Lauder and say what's going on here, and he said, "Oops, we made an error. It's 22 to 20."
There you go. Excellent.
We'll fix it.
So you fixed that already. All right, good.
I did. I fixed that.
Excellent. Well done.
Nothing
slips
that
by
actually
you.
happened. So let's see. And now Pete Buttigieg goes from 10 to 6, and Beto O'Rourke from 3 to 3. So it's a very, very good number for Elizabeth Warren. And the way that Lauder writes it up, he says, where is this right up here?
He forgot it. Go write him. Tell him to put it back in.
New California poll is first to show Elizabeth Warren leading in a big, diverse state of the sort she'd need to capture the nomination. The news is bad in New California poll for 2 home state candidates, Kamala Harris and, and Tom Steyer, who's at 0.1%. Don't forget Tom Steyer's a Californian as well.
Sure, I'll keep that in mind.
Right? So that's important. And, Joe Biden has said he's best prepared to go toe-to-toe with Trump, and now he's moving closer to calling for Trump's impeachment, says the LA Times.
Okay.
All right. Oh, by the way,
we can
special
work
note
that
for
into
Ron
that.
Brownstein, David Lauder writes, in the new poll, Elizabeth Warren is leading the Democratic race among non-college whites. with 29%.
Non-college.
Yeah, Ron Brownstein loves following non-college whites.
That could be a thing. Her primary
everybody
appeal
says,
was
she's
college.
only getting
right.
the rich white vote. Well, actually, she's getting the poor white vote, too.
Well, it could be rich non-college people.
Yeah.
Like Bill Gates.
Anyway, so there's that. I think that's important. Other than that, how was your day?
Me, I don't know. It's been pretty boring to this point.
Right. So I'll lighten it up. This is a funny exchange I saw on Twitter between our friend David Neer and Norm Ornstein and somebody else. So David Neer writes, look, if there's an impeachment inquiry, if there is one, and Dems do hold hearings, can we please, please, please have only congressional staff attorneys ask questions of witnesses? You know who Norm Ornstein is.
Yes, more importantly, Norm Ornstein knows who I am.
Yeah, there you go. So that clearly makes him an expert. Would we stipulate to that?
He'll tell you he knows.
He knows who you are.
Yeah.
He'll tell you.
I've made it plain.
Anyway,
okay.
So Norm Ornstein writes, more than that, only 30-minute rounds, no 5-minute farces. Republicans cannot possibly sustain the nonsense defense of Trump for 30 minutes, but it can do 5-minute rants with time for witnesses to get a breather after filibustering for 4 of the 5 minutes.
Yes.
So 30 minutes gives counsel time to probe, ask follow-ups, and sustain lines of argument. Mm-hmm. And I won't mention the name. I don't want to embarrass them. But they write in and say, oh, listen, I'm just spitballing here, Norm, but let the experts set the structure.
Okay.
And David,
James,
our friend David says, this is hilarious. Do you have any idea you just replied to the most preeminent scholar of Congress alive?
Yeah.
Okay, David's exaggerating a little bit for effect, but it's still pretty funny. It's what less like Marshall McLuhan. You know nothing about my work.
Yeah. Right. Norm Ornstein knows a thing or two. That's true. Although that happens to me fairly frequently too. I'm not a blue checkmark level famous guy at knowing what's going on.
Right, but I enjoy those too. So, do you know anything about Congress? Have you ever worked there, David?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, actually,
it does happen from time to time. But yeah, and okay, I now I recognize who was involved in the conversation too, and a Twitter friend and follower. So yeah, okay. So he may have meant. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt that he may have meant something slightly different, other than that Norm Ornstein isn't such an expert. But well, maybe not. Not everyone knows Norm Ornstein, blue check mark or not. There's a lot of weirdos running around with blue check marks.
Right, that was still pretty funny. I got another funny one too, but this has to do with medieval Twitter. I just want to give you an idea of how these things play out sometimes. And let me just send this one to you.
Medieval
if I can
Twitter.
here.
Oh, okay. I get you. Talking about medieval things via Twitter.
About medieval things.
I know they did not have Twitter.
All right. So
let's see.
There's this interesting story. A woman discovers a Renaissance masterpiece in her kitchen.
Oh.
Basically, in France, there was a house and the estate was set up, and hanging over the little hot plate that people used to cook was a Renaissance masterpiece from the 13th century. Yes. And that's the story in The Guardian.
Okay.
It's a lovely little story.
Why
These things
is it
happen.
hanging there?
There used to be this British series called Lovejoy, which is basically about an antiques dealer who had this nose for finding masterpieces.
I see.
In the junk that he would go through. And it was a mystery, and, he was kind of a lowlife, and people around him were wonderful lowlifes and funny and such. But basically,
Like
the heart of the show is all about these antiques and how you find out whether you manufacture them yourself like this guy did, or whether you actually discovered real ones like this guy did. He was just good at what it was. It was a wonderful show. So every once in a while, he'd walk through something and say, "Oh my gosh, look at that! You think that that's junk, and that's actually, Antiques Roadshow for the original British version of it." So in any case, the story comes out in the Guardian. 13th century painter and woman discovers Renaissance masterpiece. So one of the medieval experts writes, the 13th century is medieval. It's not Renaissance. I like it, and it's old, and Italian doesn't make it Renaissance.
Oh, well, yes, okay.
Okay, so everybody's writing in to tell her she's wrong. And, of course, she's an expert on this. It's just really funny. And basically she says, look, open the syllabus and do your reading before you come in here and bother me about this stuff. Yeah. And so, every once in a while, you actually discover an expert on
They are
Twitter,
out there.
And it's just really fun to do that.
So there were people arguing that 13th century is Renaissance, or were people just saying that?
Yeah, well, they're saying that the article said it's Renaissance. And,
okay.
And people are saying it must be Renaissance.
That's an important point, though, about the power of the media, right? And how often this overlaps with when I run into trouble with people saying, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not an expert. This newspaper article says that you can, like, for instance, that you can do this under reconciliation. Yeah, but the article is wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't
How
depend
do I know
on
that? Because I'm an actual expert.
All right. Well, very interesting to see, and why you would continue to argue about whether the 13th century is Renaissance.
Well, what is Norm
That's just
Ornstein
dictionary.
know?
Yeah, right. I guess. And,
right. So I'm just going to conclude my segment with one of the guys I follow to figure out what's going on with Israeli politics is a fellow named Elan Levy.
Israel now.
And he had tweeted a couple of weeks ago, but I saved this. If we all tweeted, just check with an expert and you're right, at least once a month, Twitter could be such a lovely place.
Well, it might help, but it wouldn't be.
Which is
as
why
much fun.
When I get on the show and I find something really interesting and I don't understand it, I turn to David and say, this is a process thing. I don't understand it. What does it mean? And the one I'm going to finish my segment with, which is all of this was leading up to, really, is this story that came from Lawfare back in January, which is called, Can the Senate Decline to Try an Impeachment Case? Because I assume that all sorts of people on Twitter are going to be out there with their opinions about this.
Yes.
Because they read something from somewhere else on Twitter, or they heard it at the water cooler.
Yeah.
But the question on the matter, and this is an article, I know it's lawfare, not everybody loves lawfare. This is by Bob Bauer, who I think is a legitimate subject matter expert on this at least. And the question is, can Mitch McConnell block, let's say the House and Nancy Pelosi and her caucus does decide to vote up articles of impeachment, can the Senate decline to try an impeachment case?
Mm-hmm. Are you asking me?
I'm asking.
Are you telling me? Sure, the Senate can do anything. There you go.
So there's no obligation to do it.
Legally,
they're the ones that are allowed to do it.
Constitutionally,
that, and there's a process for it.
No, my guess would be sole power means the sole power to do it and the sole power not to. There's no, and honestly, whatever answer they give, we've been handed an impeachment, therefore we must all pile into a clown car and launch it into the sun. That's, the problem is, if it's a sole power, where do you go to appeal it? And the answer is, I said it was sole.
The Senate gets to decide?
Yeah.
I mean, is this one of these things where if you don't like my ruling, we put it up for a vote and my party has more than you, then therefore I win? Is that one of those things?
Yeah, you might not even have to do that. But, I mean, I would tell you, I mean, no one's ever done this before, so we don't know what the outcome of a lawsuit would be. And, of course, if they had reason to do
Right,
it.
but you have more
Supreme
grounds
Court
for
could intervene.
speculation than I do. So I'm
Okay,
asking
yeah, I
an
would-
expert, what do
all
you
right.
do in this situation?
Yeah. What do you do once they decide they're not going to do anything?
Well, can they?
Can they? Yes.
What process would they use to block it, and what could you do about it?
Any process they wanted to. They could simply do nothing. I mean, can you block a Supreme Court nomination by never considering it? No. I mean, yes.
Well, apparently.
They did. Right.
Don't use precedent to tell me you
right.
can't.
Before they didn't do it, the answer was no, of course not. And now the answer is yes. Just as, when I said they can change the way the filibuster rule works with a simple vote. No, you can't. People would point me to articles that say everyone knows that this article says it takes 67 votes. I know, but the article's wrong. Eventually we got around to the right answer in this. Sure, they can ignore it. They could have a vote. They could summarily dismiss the charges by majority vote if they want. They could simply do nothing. They could vote to table privileged motions from the minority that they must take up the impeachment. There are lots of ways they could simply decide not to do it. And I would guess that this Supreme Court would say, I had a look at the Constitution. It says they have the sole power to do it. So not only do they have the power to do it, but like it says, it's sole, and this case is dismissed because it's not justiciable. Remember, we were just talking about that in the UK.
And my first thought is, oh my gosh, if only Trump would lie to the Queen, at least we have some place we could go.
Right. Right, but they were on the verge there, I guess, for a while.
Well, the lower court said it wasn't,
yeah.
And then the high court said it was.
Right, all 11 of them, unanimously. And then we had an argument about whether or not it was unanimous in the Senate over here today. A lot of parallels going on today, right. But not enough music, which is next. Okay.
No, pleasure talking to you. I think I'll come back tomorrow and we'll do some more. But that's the basic setup. And there's all sorts of interesting things here. So when you come across somebody on Twitter who might actually know more than you do, be nice to them, at least for a tweet or two, till you figure out who they are.
Yes. Then savage them.
Then savage them after, but at least you know who you're savage.
Right. Okay. Well, at least look things up. It's always wise to know. Thanks very much, Greg. We'll be back in a minute.
Let's play X the Expert tomorrow.
Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Took a break for a minute for, no apparent reason. I was just telling Greg on his way out the door, we'll have to see if we can address it tomorrow if necessary. But I guess I'll answer the questions being posed here too. We'll welcome Mike Stark as a new listener to the show. How do you like that? He's pointing out today, he says he's embarrassed, although I don't think there's any embarrassment involved, to say, I'm listening to Kagro in the morning for the very first time, which is, I agree, that is an embarrassing thing to do. Being caught listening to the show, you don't want to admit to, if you can't help it. And already downloaded the app to catch up when you miss. So you're going to be busy for a while. I think you missed about 6 years or so of the show. There's a lot of it, but don't worry about it. Likely you could guess very well what the content of the previous 6 years was. Now, the question, and I'm not certain how to answer this because I'm not certain of, the question is, why do Dems want this to go so fast? Why not have a long inquiry and drag everything into the sunlight? And I might be missing something here, but in the rush this morning to get my son a T-shirt, that would indicate that he was dressed from some other decade. Perhaps you heard that story. I don't know that I am aware of any interest in a rush from Democrats. I'm sure that there's divergent viewpoints because there are at least 2 Democrats paying attention to the impeachment process, at least one of whom I'm sure wants it to go fast and one of whom wants to drag it out and go slow. So I'm not 100% sure what question I'm answering here, but I do get the sense that, is it perhaps why are we so quickly turning to demands for the entirety of the whistleblower report and to have the whistleblower testify and have the DNI here? That's not even particularly fast. But there is a lot of strategery playing out here, especially now as we're trying to unravel the supposed mystery of what really brought the speaker around, and was she somebody that had to be brought around at all, or was she playing rear guard defense for the front line? Ironically enough, she has to lay down a rear guard defense for the front line Democrats and all this. There is a very interesting and rings true to me article from Ryan Grimm in The Intercept, I believe, today. That's right. I'm losing track of who's where these days, but Ryan's been at The Intercept for like 200 years at this point. But a good article that explains things in a way that I think is a little closer to how things may have worked than the 11-dimensional chess approach to things. So I don't know. We'll have Joan McCarter join us in a little bit, and maybe she can help me clarify this so that I can give you a better answer to why Dems want it, whatever it is, to go fast. I don't know that they do. By the way, we can revive a personal hobby horse for me and a couple of other listeners who remember, and I've seen them tweeting about it in the past couple of days too, so it's nice to know that the message sank in. But the Democrats in the House can, if they want to, make this last a long, long time. And I'm sure Mike is driving at the idea that they ought to keep the scandals leading to impeachment in the news for as long as possible and have daily in-depth examinations of Trump's wrongdoing being revealed piece by piece, drip, drip, drip. And I think I agree with that strategy. But since I haven't heard anybody strategize about why it should move quickly, I can't evaluate that, but probably, well, it's only Wednesday, though it doesn't feel like it. So we do have a couple more days to figure that out and see whether it makes any sense. There may be certain parts of it that it makes sense to move quickly on, like maybe uncovering more of the facts and discussing things with the whistleblower. You got to keep Ukraine at a rapid boil, I think, for the next couple of days, since it's being credited, rightly or wrongly, with pushing things over the edge. I'm glad we spent some time yesterday discussing why it is a mistake to accept the analysis that separates Ukraine from Trump-Russia and all that's come before. And I know people think, ironically, that they are fatigued of the Trump-Russia story. But to encapsulate things, I guess the thumbnail sketch of why it's ridiculous to separate them, all you need to do is, if you're at all up on the news and you answer the questions honestly, you'll see where I'm going with this. And I'm sure you would all be answering questions honestly. I don't mean to cast aspersions, but why was the money of interest to Ukraine? This wasn't a simple payday for the Ukrainian president. It wasn't a bribe for him. It hasn't even been suggested that that's the case. Nor was it simply a case of, well, Ukrainian government wants money because all governments want money. There was a very specific purpose attached to this money. Why was $250 million, which had been appropriated by Congress and was being withheld on Trump's orders, very specifically his personal orders at the moment, why was that money being dangled before the Ukrainian president? Why was it of interest to the president and the Ukrainian president and Ukraine as a country? And the answer is the purpose of the money was to fight Russian incursions into Ukraine, both political and, very pointedly, military incursions in Ukraine, both by Russian forces proper in Crimea and Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine who are fighting with, for one thing, Russian weapons, and for another thing, in all likelihood, actual Russian troops, simply not identifying as such. So we were sending them money to fight Russia. Why were they in the business of fighting Russia? They were in the business of fighting Russia because they were being invaded by Russia, and their elections and their own processes, democratic processes, were being interfered with by Russians for the same purpose that they were interfering in our own affairs. And in case you didn't think the two things were connected there, I remind you, as I did yesterday, of the taped discussion from May of 2016 involving all of the then House leadership about it. They knew what was going on. They knew why Ukraine was under threat. They knew exactly where the threat was coming from. They knew what Ukraine needed in order to combat the threat. They even disagreed among them about whether or not the United States was doing anything about it. But bottom line here, you can't separate the two of them, because the reason Ukraine had money on the table, the reason there was an offer pending of funding from the United States, is because Russia. And why would anybody deny funding to a potential ally, a putative ally, who said that they wanted to join NATO, said that they wanted to join the European Union, wanted to westernize, wanted to go closer to the West and move away from Russia? Why would anybody get in the way of funding that effort? And why would anybody get in the way of funding their effort to defend themselves against Russia's military and political action against it? The answer is, well, it would only happen if the person was Putin's puppet, exactly like Hillary Clinton said he was. That's why he's interested in slowing down funding to Ukraine. The fact that he could also leverage something else out of him is actually the second story. It may be the more relatable, perhaps, given that Donald Trump is a grifter and everyone knows it. But even there, you have difficulty separating it from Russia. Why was he trying to leverage, why was he trying to exercise leverage with the money? Well, to help him cheat to win the election. Oh, yeah. Where have we heard that story before? Right. And also, you should also probably have no trouble understanding right away, right off the bat. Basically, trying to differentiate between Russia and Ukraine when it comes to international relations is, and although they're headed in different directions, don't get me wrong about that, there's just no readiness among the American public to differentiate between the two. And I think you're trying to drive an elephant through, this tiny crack here. It doesn't make any sense, and you shouldn't fall for it. And although you can go along with the play to focus on Ukraine for the next couple of days and not constantly be bringing up Russia, you just need to know, I think, as an educated human being, that it's inseparable, and it's at the heart of how Ukraine was selected as a flashpoint by the idiot Donald Trump. So please keep that in mind. All right, so we have that. Now, further, we'll probably have to address the other message that Mike sent along tomorrow, if we decide to address it at all. But would it be less than transparent for me to point out that his second message to us was also F. Greg? So that thing makes it a little bit awkward, which he says with a smile, because I'm not resentful. He says that he assumed the worst about me. I'm sure that at some point in the past, I don't know, could have been you have a long history online, Mike, so it could have been recent, could have been long time ago. But let's see what it says here. So for some reason, Greg, thinks there's something wrong with people raising money online. I assume he has a finer point on it than that, even when they keep none of it for themselves. So you must have been looking at some point for crowdfunding for one of your many very valuable projects in political journalism, and which, by the way, I guess maybe we should talk to you about this at some point too, about how you recently, I think, have what would we say, retired from that field, or have drawn that career to a close, or maybe you've had second thoughts about that and changed your mind since then. I don't know. But Mike, for any of you who don't know, Mike has been out there battling for quite a long time, right along the, I guess we'll say, the bleeding edge of netroots activism and journalism. And there's always overlap between the two. And I guess maybe we'll give a shot tomorrow at seeing if Greg can even recall what this incident was about. But it would be less than honest to pretend that tweet did not follow up the first one. But okay, we'll all have a smile about that one and move on from here. Let's see. What else have we? Why don't we gather up a couple other points that people are bringing up about things? Let's see. Mike Musson. What do we have here? Mad Hatter liking a Mike Musson point here. We got to catch up with this one. He's saying, great point here, and passing on Sophie Wilkinson's tweet here. I think Greta Thunberg is the first 16-year-old girl in a long time who's presented to the public outside of a sexual lens, and a lot of men can't handle it. Oh, that is a great point. Interesting. I'm glad I saw the retweet of it because I missed the original point. What else have we here? Greg retweeting the tweet of Jordan Fabian. Who's Jordan here? Just got to catch up with everybody and get it straight in my own head here. Covering the White House for business. Is that Business Week? Is that Bloomberg Business? Yeah. Okay. The tweet, Trump pushed Ukraine to work with Giuliani and Barr on Biden. Okay, so I mean, is that just a headline laying it directly at his feet? I think that's been, if we didn't guess, then it's pretty well established. Let's see, rolling back towards the beginning of the show, I just want to correct or comment again for the record. But our friend in Prince Edward Island, on Prince Edward Island, what do we say about that? She's in the province of Prince Edward Island, which is an island that she is on. I'm confused about the syntax on this one, but Ricky the Kanakistani, as she calls herself, says, I guess I had a point of disagreement about my T-shirt selection. Pardon. The T-shirt selection for my son, saying, as I was trying to recount the history of U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia, that her view of it was that Saudi Arabia didn't have anything to do with the first time that we went to Iraq, because it was that Iraq had invaded Kuwait. I was young, but I remember watching it on TV. But my recollection of it differs. Saudi Arabia played a fairly significant role in all of that by offering us a place, a forward operating base from which to amass the troops there who were, I think everybody knew, eventually there to, the mission was liberate Kuwait, and they did do it. And of course, this was the first Gulf War when we famously did not make our way all the way to Baghdad, and that became a point of contention and kept Dick Cheney involved in politics for longer than he should have been. But Saudi Arabia played a fairly significant role there, and our troops were initially staged there under the Desert Shield mission moniker, with the idea, I think, that we were there to protect Saudi Arabia from the threat of Iraq rolling on past Kuwait, though I don't know if they ever expressed any interest in doing so. But then they never expressed any interest in stealing their baby incubators from the NICUs in Kuwait either, but we went ahead and said that. So who knows? But we left our troops there for quite a while and then used it as an operating base for the, I guess, invasion, by invitation, of Kuwait, the push on into Iraq, and I think we left them there for some time afterwards. But I thought it was fairly well established that Osama bin Laden took particular offense to American troops on Saud-owned soil, and whether or not that was the chief complaint in his, if he ever wrote down, this is my manifesto of why I did 9/11, I don't know. But okay, that's my recollection. Here comes Joan McCarter. Maybe she can tell you her recollection of all these things. But like I said, I'm having difficulty deciding whether there are any important stories happening today. So I thought I'd have Joan on, because sometimes things that are important to American politics happen in and around Congress, and that's her job to watch these things now. Since I stopped way back when. When did I stop that? I don't know. It's some years.
It's been a while.
Yeah. Well, they got frustrating and boring at some point to me, and so then they became frustrating and boring for you. I thought that would be A good transfer of the power. Hello, and have you heard any news today?
Hello.
Right.
Well, there is actually kind of news in the last few minutes.
Oh, good. Excellent. I'm glad someone was able to keep an eye
We've
on
all
that.
been saying the transcript is a head fake. The transcript is a head fake. Don't get distracted by the transcript.
Okay.
Because it's the whistleblower complaint that matters. But the transcript's out, or the memo.
Okay.
And it's not exactly exculpatory.
I had a feeling they might have screwed that up. All right.
Yeah. Good news. No, the president says good because I heard you had a prosecutor who was very good and he was shut down, and that's really unfair. A lot of people are talking about it and the way they shut your very good prosecutor down, and you had some very bad people involved. Mr. Giuliani is a highly respected man. He was the mayor of New York City, great mayor, and I'd like him to call you. I will ask him to call you along with the Attorney General.
Huh.
Rudy very much knows what's happening, and he's very capable, and he's a very capable guy. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. The other thing, there's a lot of talk about Biden's son. The Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out about that. So whatever you can do with the Attorney General, William Barr, would be great. Biden went around bragging that he stopped the prosecution, so if you can look into it, it sounds horrible to me.
Okay. Where can I find this?
This is what they release is the totally innocent, innocuous transcript of the call.
From the beginning, I guess they have said, well, I never said I, demand this and you won't get your money if that, and that was, they were doing the no quid pro quo line, but it's all dancing around the same thing that everybody thought they were saying.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And that's maybe 3 of what we know are 8 instructions, requests,
yes, right.
ideas that maybe Ukraine should look into Biden.
Yeah.
That's just a portion of it.
Yeah. I mean...
But also the part Rudy and the Attorney General.
Yeah. That makes such sense as a pairing. Yeah, by the way, are we finally going to get somebody on the Logan Act ever? I mean, no one's ever been convicted, so it's kind of a dead letter in some minds. But I think it was just considered a dead letter because, well, no one would ever be so completely... You would have to be so stupid to actually fall under the Logan Act that it's impossible for it ever to happen.
Memories about the Logan Act.
The Logan Act is I think, when I say dead letter, I mean, I think it's like a late 18th century, Alien and Sedition Act era.
1799.
Yeah, okay. Ordinance or statute that makes it, as I recall, it's illegal for unauthorized people, basically without the official imprimatur of the U.S. government, to conduct diplomacy. I guess ordinarily it was supposed to be independent of the president's direction. So maybe that's what saves them, perhaps, on the Logan Act. But Rudy Giuliani operating as the president's private attorney, purporting to be there to deal with them at the behest of the State Department, which the State Department, I believe, denies. And it's supposed to criminalize the private pursuit of diplomatic relations on behalf of the United States, which would seem still
by a
to
citizen,
fit here.
yes.
Yeah. But they've never been able to nail anybody. And of course, I think there's actually some tradition of presidents resorting to trusted confidants to conduct behind-the-scenes diplomacy, although it usually comes with the warning, hey, you're going to have to do this delicately because this cannot be considered an official United States position. It's usually used in situations like the Cuban Missile Crisis, I need you to speak to someone back channel on the Soviet side and get some sense from someone you trust. Is Khrushchev still in control of the Soviet Union? That sort of thing. As opposed to, I want you to get dirt on Biden for the campaign. Not really Cuban Missile Crisis level situation. But, by
the way, Wikipedia tells us the act was amended in 1994, changing the penalty for violation from fined $5,000 to fined under this title. The only time it's been amended, apparently, and violating it is indeed a felony.
Yes.
But only 2 people have ever been indicted. Neither were convicted.
Yeah. Why did we change
one in 1802 and one in 1852.
What happened in 94 that made us change it? I wonder. We'll have to research project.
Know. Yes. But, still.
Yeah, it's out there. And every once in a while, it gets brought up. And usually, I guess in later years, it's been brought up. Usually, Republicans accusing, Nancy Pelosi has gone to, Syria. Or I forget exactly who went where. It was usually Nancy Pelosi, though. And this is a violation of the Logan Act, and it's up to Republicans to conduct diplomacy here. Usually under the George W. Bush administration, they were angry about any time Pelosi did anything. There's usually a charge in later days leveled at Democrats by Republicans, but foolishly usually, and it never even involves a serious investigation. But here we already have the investigation rolling, so we might as well take a look. There's going to be some questions about whether or not, especially as the State Department continues to deny it, and I guess I wonder how long they'll continue to do that. I mean, is Trump not saying, hey, Pompeo, you got to get out there and undeny it? But I don't know why that hasn't happened yet. But this is because Rudy Giuliani is a crazy freelancer and says whatever comes to mind.
But he's not he's a crazy freelancer when he goes on Fox News, but he's not a freelancer because he's doing it at Trump's behest. He's doing it because Trump has asked him to, and he's doing it as if he were part of Trump's staff.
Yes.
He's not.
Yeah. And
administration staff. He's a pro bono lawyer, right? Trump's not paying him, correct?
Well, yeah, that's what they say.
You see
and
pro
Trump doesn't
bono
pay
thrown
anybody.
around, but who knows?
Yeah,
who knows how Rudy's getting paid for his assistance to Trump?
I mean, Paul Manafort was pro bono too. Although, pro bono actually means something in Latin, and there's no bono going on here. So,
and we don't know if anything Rudy actually says is
right.
Who knows? But
could be lying.
He had the transcript read to him. He says he's seen the whistleblower complaint.
Shouldn't have. By the way,
no, absolutely not. He shouldn't have.
Today,
not when Congress hasn't seen it.
Right. A lot of time spent yesterday in saying, "Well, we're gonna, the White House will release the whistleblower report. We concede this. Why do you have it? You shouldn't. It's about you."
The White House is not supposed to have it. That's the first really, really hinky thing here.
Yes.
The White House is not supposed to have any say. The Department of Justice is not supposed to have any say in a whistleblower complaint in the intelligence community from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence or from the Inspector General sending to Congress.
Huge problem.
They are out of that picture entirely, supposedly.
Yeah. But they're not, so Yeah. So that's a violation all by itself, and an avenue of inquiry for impeachment all by itself. No less so than diving into people's FBI files.
Impeachment inquiry will be broad enough to include that.
Yes. Well, eventually it will, and perhaps do you know what's going on here? In that I was asked. Mike Stark is listening today for the first time. He has let us know. And he had a question. Yes, and I have an update, by the way, and his story. He now tells us, oops, it wasn't Greg Dworkin I was thinking of who was mad at me for raising money online in the first place. Anyway, so sorry about that. I got the wrong guy. Anyway, so I'm glad that's straightened out. We don't have to spend time on that tomorrow. But he had posed the question of why were Dems so interested in rushing this and moving so fast? Don't they want to draw this process out? And I hadn't heard that anyone was trying to move it faster. And maybe you were able to pay attention.
Expedite. Apparently, Nancy Pelosi told the caucus last night, and they want to try to get it done before 2020. They don't want it for some inexplicable reason to be considered during the election.
Okay, well, as you know, she has dictated everything with respect to this whole impeachment process and has gotten her way every single time. So I'm not certain how worried I'd be about it, but I'm glad to know what he's talking about so that we can analyze it, and perhaps we want to return to it after the break. Although so many fires are going on at once, I couldn't tell you. We'll let Joan decide what's top of mind and of top importance after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter's still with us. We're trying to kind of figure out what's top line importance, and there's just no way to put out all the fires. But
no.
Well, let's see. We were still discussing the release of this. I guess what they're calling it. Are they still calling it a transcript?
They're calling it a transcript. Everybody's calling it a transcript. It's in actual fact, I think that the process it's a memo.
Yeah, all right.
That whoever is in the room with Trump when the call is made is taking notes.
This is what we used to call back when presidents routinely released such things. They used to call them, I think, readout of the call.
Readout, yeah.
But then the Trump administration declined to provide readouts of any of their calls and then started confiscating notes from translators as well. Just happens for no real reason.
Which, just as a side note, it would be very smart for investigators to go to Ukraine to get their probable recording of the call. Just,
Yes.
To put a bow on it all so that we know everything is hunky-dory coming from the White House because, Mr. Sharpie is not going to send.
That's right.
But apparently this memo, which was supposed to be exculpatory, is really not, as we talked about in the last segment. Mm-hmm. CNN has a little bit more. Their Chiron right now reads, Trump tells Ukraine that U.S. has been very, very good to Ukraine, and then asks for a, quote, favor.
Are you kidding? I didn't register with me the second part. I mean, how can I guess he's watched too many gangster movies and he thinks that's not evidence of a quid pro quo, but it.
By the way, he is by the time this call has been made, the money that Congress has appropriated for Ukraine, and this is another part of the story, Congress has appropriated this money.
Yes.
Has not been sent.
Right.
Ukraine knows this money has not been sent. Ukraine is waiting for this money. Ukraine has Russia at its eastern border in the Donbass region ready to pile in.
Yes, and already over its border. That's another side
story that maybe we can talk about later that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
What's happening simultaneously there in this region with Russia.
Yes.
So anyway,
why wait? But
here they are waiting for the money that they know is coming because Congress has appropriated.
Is that the very, very good part? I mean, because we haven't.
No, it's not we've been very, very good in the past. This pot of money is sitting here for you. I have put a hold on it. I am not releasing it. We've been very, very good to you, and we need a favor.
All right. Well, I mean, the favor is, I mean, it's not even coded.
No, it's not even coded.
That's weird. Well, he's dumb.
It's kind of,
That's not
when
weird.
he says there's no quid pro quo.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm visualizing him ranting. There's no quid pro quo. No quid pro quo. There's no quid pro quo in all this. What does quid pro quo mean?
Total exoneration.
Yeah, right. Someone tell me quid pro quo again.
What
I thought, that.
I learned Latin.
The whole thing is quid pro quo. Oh my God. Why did I say that? It's all I can imagine happening. I see, I managed to grab one tweet from Greg Sargent, which has screen caps, I guess, of parts of this memo, which, just for the record, appears to bear evidence of Sharpie, actually, on the thing. I mean, it would be correct in the, unlike the weather map thing, and that this is stamped unclassified, and Sharpie has been used to cross out the classification that has previously been stamped on it. But it is Sharpie, and and he does supposedly have the legal right to declassify information on his say-so, although that's a bad idea, and it was a law we designed when we thought the president was going to be non-crazy idiot forever. But,
how appropriate is it that it's Sharpie?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It's literally written there. It could have been anyone, and lots of people have Sharpies, but, that's just synonymous with lying now, and Sharpie, I maintain, should be suing him for damage to their brand. But okay, that's up to them. So, no quid pro quo, but all quid pro quo.
This is fun. Robert Costa is tweeting that he's spoken with several Senate Republicans who are, quote, stunned, in his words, that the White House is releasing this transcript. They do not think it helps the president's cause. And they expect today's Senate GOP lunch to be quite the get-together.
Why? What are they serving?
Is it Chowder Day in the Senate? I don't know.
I guess so. So, well, so let me see. So they don't think it's. I mean, there was objection originally to releasing the transcript also on sort of on precedential and national security grounds, that we don't ordinarily release a verbatim transcript of calls, and that isn't what they've done here either, I guess. But so there were some people reminding us that we shouldn't be releasing such things because then our allies will not be able to feel like they can speak frankly with president. But I believe they feel that way now.
I'm sorry. I was just reading another snippet, and it just gets better.
Oh, no. All right.
There's another favor. And maybe this is what he was talking about, that the favor wasn't about Biden.
Oh.
I would like you to do us a favor, though, because our country has been through a lot and Ukraine knows a whole lot about it. Okay.
Uh-huh.
I would like you to find out what happened with this whole situation with Ukraine. They say CrowdStrike. I guess you have one of your wealthy people, the server. They say Ukraine has it.
Okay.
He thinks Ukraine has the missing DNC server?
Wow. I mean, if that's it, because that's the first thing that came to mind when you said it. I mean, I suppose he could pretend it's something else, but yesterday I was saying this case in particular, all by itself, illustrates so much, including how dangerous it is to have an empty-headed moron president who will believe whatever the television tells him.
Yeah.
We're making national policy, such as it is, based on whatever Fox News personalities make up. The president believes.
Believes it.
You're supposed to have a critical
president. He sees it on the TV
president.
coming from a Fox person's mouth, and he believes it's true.
So he's pressuring another country to do something that do us a favor send us this thing, which might not exist at all. And they'll be puzzled. They won't know what to do. They won't know how to satisfy him, etc. But, all sorts of crises will arise because he believed garbage that somebody made up on Fox News, that the missing DNC servers, and for all I know, the missing Hillary Clinton emails he believes are on this server. And
for some reason, Ukraine has them.
Plus, he can't even articulate what he wants in the sentence. So even if it was something innocuous, the Ukrainians wouldn't know how to satisfy him. Wow.
But he would like to have the Attorney General call you or your people, and I'd like you to get to the bottom of it. This is just, I don't understand this part at all. As you saw yesterday, that whole nonsense ended with a very poor performance by a man named Robert Mueller. An incompetent performance, but they say a lot of it started with Ukraine. Whatever you can do, it's very important that you do it if that's possible. Okay, yeah, a lot of it did start with Ukraine and Paul Manafort.
Okay. Yes, right.
And the attempt by the successful attempt by the Manafort wing of Trump's campaign to get the RNC platform changed in favor of Russia regarding Ukraine. So, yeah. There is a great deal of Ukraine in the Mueller report, but he needs to find the missing DNC server that's not actually missing, and it's in Ukraine.
Sure. And so is Jimmy Hoffa, and I solved that.
And by the way, Joe Biden's son.
Yes. Right, P.S. So maybe he thinks it's secondary. Clearly, my first interest is in relitigating 2016, putting Hillary Clinton in jail. And so it's the same obsession as always. Joe Biden's son was an afterthought. See? Exculpatory.
Maybe. They could be equal thoughts.
Yes. Right, which is to say, they're not thoughts at all. They're barely droolings, but... That's amazing. But it does bring us around to the point again that, yes, although Ukraine plays a role in the Mueller report and in the 2016 campaign and all the nefarious wrongdoing going on in the Trump campaign, another point in favor of rejecting the idea that Ukraine and Russia be regarded as separate scandals and separate issues. Ukraine was a problem because it was governed by a Russian puppet government at the time, a corrupt government that maintained the outward appearance of independence, but which was run by oligarchs who, some of whom were Ukrainian, some of whom were Russian, some of whom moved freely in between the two, and even they didn't really distinguish all that well at that level between Russia and Ukraine. The Ukrainian president, whom Manafort worked for and helped in all of his projects, eventually was not only thrown out as president, but had to flee the country. Where did he go? He went, he didn't go to Argentina. He didn't go hiking the Appalachian Trail. He went to Russia. Why? Because Russia was intimately involved in this, as you would expect, just geographically and historically, they're going to cross-pollinate. But, there's no separating the two, and there's no sense in, and I don't know why pundits ostensibly on our own side say, don't mention Russia when you're dealing. You're not going to be able to unravel Ukraine unless you mention Russia.
I don't understand why they think Russia is such a complicated issue, and why apparently the House Democrats think Russia is such a complicated issue. It's not.
But it's part and parcel of this, so I definitely object to the separation idea.
Which, by the way, while this is playing out, we've got Ukraine deciding, agreeing, peace negotiating with Russia in the eastern region called the Donbass of Ukraine that Russia is trying to get into.
Yes.
They've been sending, quote, humanitarian convoys in for months. It's troops. They are sending troops in this peace negotiation in this region while all of this is playing out with Trump. Ukraine says, okay, we'll withdraw. Come on in, Russia.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, this is going on at the same time, and you absolutely cannot separate Russia and Ukraine in this investigation.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know what else to add to that. Nothing. You've summarized it perfectly well here. I just...
And for me, we know that it's not just this phone call that is in the whistleblower complaint. We've known for a long time that Giuliani has been trying to do stuff in Ukraine. We know that he's been freelancing. That part wasn't news. What would cause an intelligence person's hair to be absolutely on fire with Trump's dealings with Ukraine? That, yes, he's asking for quid pro quo on a political rival. That's a big deal. But maybe, just maybe, it's what is he promising Russia he would do? And remember, there's promises being tossed around
we never
here
did
too.
Get
Trump
that.
Promising to do something.
Yes.
Is Trump promising to release money that's already been appropriated, earmarked, lawfully supposed to be sent to Ukraine? A promise? Or might the promise be something to Putin?
Yeah, something that's not on the call. Remember,
So,
of course, it's not all about the call.
Yeah.
That's a good
So that's
question.
it's all speculation on my part.
That's all right. I'm open to that.
But it is all kind of a big deal.
Yes.
I mean, it just does Giuliani messing around in Ukraine rise to the level of the extremely urgent concern by the IC whistleblower?
Yeah, all by itself, it may very well. Now, as I'm thinking about this, what you were telling me about the region of eastern Ukraine that we're talking about here, Donbass. Mm-hmm. I mean, we haven't talked about it in terms of the name of the region. We haven't been referring to it that way, not on the show, and not really in American politics all that much either. But just to refresh everyone's memory, that is the region from which the Dutch airliner was shot down in 2014, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, This is a serious flashpoint here. They're involved in such a hot shooting war there, which we're ignoring for various reasons.
It's war. Yes.
That this is what's going on there. I mean, this is not occasional vandalism of each other's important historical sites. This is an outright war being fought with weapons rising to the level of surface-to-air missiles that shot down an airliner right in front of everybody, which we still really haven't. I mean, honestly, has the world ever really accounted for that? No. So,
I'm going to send you a link.
So we sent
Mark
Giuliani
Sumner,
to this?
What about Giuliani?
So I'm just pointing out, so we shoot down an airliner over this area, and years later, the solution is, what we'll do is we'll settle this with favors and Rudy Giuliani. I mean, it's a serious international conflict here. And our dotard president has sent the favor extractor, Giuliani, and P.S., we'll all make this all work out if you send us the non-existent server from the DNC. This is how he's settling this still festering wound of the murder of 300 people on a Dutch airline or Malaysian airliner that left left the Netherlands.
So that's there. I just sent you the link to a story I conned Mark Sumner into writing about.
Good for you.
This.
Okay.
Because I'm good at delegating.
Yeah, well, I have a feeling he was interested.
In one of the stories he linked to, there's an actual picture of trenches that Ukrainian troops have dug.
That's like
it's trench warfare, literally, in this region.
Yeah, and so just again, reminder to tie it back to what's happening today. Trump is in the call asking for these favors, and what he's dangling is maybe the promise is to release the funds. I don't know, but this is $250 million to buy guns. When was the last time you saw Trump intervene in an arms sale to stop it? Right? This was to literally arm Ukraine to fight Russia because the Russians are simply invading Ukrainian territory. They can't stand for this neighbor of theirs to be an independent country. They want to take it back. And that's a huge red flag in international fora, like, say, the UN, where everybody was yesterday.
Yes.
And
remember, this has been a project of Trump Manafort since 2015.
Yeah. That they need to give the Russians somehow carte blanche to take control back of Ukraine, because Ukraine is one of the, there are a couple, but I guess probably the most lucrative of the former Soviet republics that has been, parceled out by the oligarchs, and many of whom are tied to Russia and owe their positions as oligarchs to Russia. And the Russian oligarchs have said, why are we letting these guys have this money? Why don't we take it? And so they, well, on what premise? I don't know. Who cares? We're international gangsters. They speak Russian there, so we'll just take it.
Well, and there is a significant Russian population there that has been clamoring for it, trying to basically start a civil war.
Yeah, for what reason?
Of all of the former Soviet republics, Ukraine is the most Russian.
Yes.
In terms of Russians having colonized it, for lack of a better term.
I mean, no, I think that's the perfect term for it. Certainly Ukrainians would tell you, it's the most Russian because they crammed Russia down our throats. To borrow the old Republican phrasing, everything gets crammed down other people's throats for Republicans.
And we don't want to explore why. Yeah.
Well, history.
So. Apparently, Lindsey Graham thinks this is all fine.
Oh yes, naturally. Well, he gets a free round of golf.
Investigated, and Lindsey Graham, being chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, probably will try to investigate Biden because that's who he is.
Well, yeah. He probably wonders why we weren't the ones doing the investigating anyway. That's another unanswered question: is why would you go to Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden? You're not putatively the head of a large investigative force yourself here in the United States? If you think that an American citizen, a prominent American citizen, is involved in some wrongdoing, yes, the claim is that a lot of it was based in Ukraine, but why don't you investigate it? And I think it's because I don't know, that would be highly illegal, or I would like it to be done for free by Ukraine instead. I don't really know there's no good answer, but I'm not sure. There's no good answer,
and I'm still, I come back again and again and again to being utterly baffled that the Republican Party in 2019 is so in bed with Russia.
It's so strange. They made their bones.
But they're not communists anymore.
Right.
They're socialists.
Yeah, right.
So.
But they still want to remind everybody socialism is bad because they use the premise of socialism to suppress and terrorize and colonize their neighbors, which they're doing now as capitalists.
But they're doing it as capitalists, and there's a lot of money to be made there. So what the hell?
Under communism, they kept it all, whereas under capitalism, we could get a slice of it, like Paul Manafort did. Now he's in jail, true, but he was fabulously wealthy for a while, and we're all going to die from our high red meat intake, and Rush Limbaugh's say so, plus possibly vaping. So what's the difference? Yeah, this is all a very strange thing, and I guess the involvement of Rudy Giuliani, just to reiterate how serious the situation was, we illustrating the seriousness of the war, the seriousness for international implications, shooting down airliners. Giuliani, it's more than just Giuliani injecting himself into international diplomacy. It's a flashpoint that could send the world into war.
Yeah.
But he's there. And not only is he there, but the U.S. ambassador, who's an actual issue area and geographic area subject matter expert, gets mysteriously recalled in the middle of all this because she's actually becoming aware, because that's her job, that Rudy Giuliani is poking around here in the Ukraine and talking to people who are really my job, not his. And that they moved other Trump-compliant ambassadors from elsewhere in to fill that vacuum as well. And I guess tomorrow we'll spend some time talking about the other Giuliani Trump cronies who accompanied him and did the advance work for Giuliani in Ukraine and tried to arrange all of this stuff. And I guess did such a great job that it failed entirely and now is the subject of an impeachment inquiry. But man,
but we also don't want to lose the idea that the State Department is coordinating. The State Department is doing all of this to put Giuliani in Ukraine. I mean, it's not happening.
Pompeo
He's not completely freelancing. The State Department is helping.
Yeah, but they won't give him a job.
Arranging.
Everybody and their mother is enacting something in this administration, but Giuliani consciously stays out. And
working for free.
Yeah, sure, because nothing they do better than work for free. That other guy who worked for free, Manafort, he did well with that. It's very odd.
Yes, I have confetti in my hair because Nancy Pelosi said the word impeachment.
Right. Well,
but
that is pretty amazing.
This all has to be handled not expeditiously. This has to be handled professionally.
Yes.
And you know, we still see a lot of confusion, and even apparently caucus members have expressed confusion about what's actually different in this. Yes, it's extremely important that she said this is an impeachment inquiry.
Yes.
But if it's just the disparate committees going on with the investigations that they've been having and somehow coming up with some memo to give to Jerry Nadler to write articles of impeachment, I don't think that's going to work.
Yeah.
I think that really this is important enough that you follow the blueprint of Watergate. You have a select committee. You have professional lawyers, people who do this as their day jobs, being prosecutors, doing the evidence gathering. You do it in front of the American people with complete transparency. You explain to them all of this very complicated stuff, and that's the case that you make.
Yes.
So yes, I'm celebrating. She said the words. I'm celebrating that it's got Trump so freaked out that he's calling her and trying to make deals.
I can't believe that.
But it demands a higher level of professionalism, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a constitutional duty. I'm not really sure what the word I'm looking for is, but it requires more than I think they're talking about doing.
Well, I think, they should probably take their time in talking about it. I like I wasn't, opposed to, but I wasn't sold on the idea of select committee until just about a second ago as you were describing things, and it dawned on me, if they go with the select committee, they have a sound basis to say, well, look, in the questioning here at the select committee, we're going to be relying on staff, not members. And I know members are used to getting their sound bites and getting their television actualities and everything, but you all got plenty of that in the committees you serve on. This is a new committee, and there won't be any expectations going into it, or let me, we'll lay them to rest right away. And say on this committee it works this way. This still allows
Cummings and Nadler and Schiff to do their other jobs.
Right.
To look into the other stuff that they have to be looking into.
Right. Which, by the way,
doesn't shut down their committee efforts, which there's a lot, by the way, in intelligence oversight and judiciary. So.
Yeah. I'll just remind everybody also that it was one of the original reasons that Nancy Pelosi gave for opposing impeachment was that all of their investigations in these other committees, in her opinion, would have to be closed down in favor of an impeachment. And that's not true. One, that's not true, and now we're supposed to forget about that. So fine, cool. She said the words. We'll dissect that history some later date. And, man, I guess we have things to talk about on Wednesdays for a while.
Yeah, we will.
Isn't there a recess scheduled?
Yeah, 2 weeks recess for Rosh Hashanah. But apparently they're going to work on impeachment during those 2 weeks. And why does it take 2 weeks?
I don't know. Well, I mean, there's 10 days of Jewish holy days, but not all of them are spent there. And there are synagogues in Washington as well. By the way, if you decide to stay over, you want to have your family with you, I understand. Put them on a plane or a train and bring them to Washington. But, only 2 days out of the 10 will you be required to attend. But okay, we're going to be talking about this for quite some time. Thanks for coming by and sharing the stories about the confetti in your hair. I think we got and also all the breaking news. It kept us up to date, just what we needed today. Thanks very much. We'll do it again on Wednesday, or if you get real excited about things, come sooner. Okay?
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Take care. All right.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Okay, what could be coming up next with Justice Putnam on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, it could be anything. He noticed the Chuck Todd episode as well. Let's see, what else has he got here? Overwhelming effort in the House voting to rebuke Trump's attack on refugees. Remember, he's still doing that. And, of course, so many other things happening around the world. Only Justice can bring you up to date.